So chapter 2 is again internal management, but then regarding social policy and human rights. So all of those criterions, which might seem a lot, but they're all related to your social policy and human rights. Oh, sorry. So first of all, the first criterion is about freedom of association. So whether trade union membership, collective labor negotiations, and representations of members by trade union is not hindered. So whether your employees can enter such a trade union membership. So you can mention if unions are active in your company or if your staff members are in fact members. Otherwise, you can just declare that you do not hinder such union or representation of members by trade unions. And if you might have this in your employee contract, you can of course attach that contract here as well. The next criterion is regarding a collective labor agreement. So in a lot of countries, a collective labor agreement exists in the sector-wide, in the sector, so in the tourism sector. However, in some companies, it doesn't exist, so there's no collective labor agreement. In that case, you can tick yes and explain that it doesn't exist in your company, in your country. Sorry. The next one is whether employees are free to enter or leave their employment through their own choice without penalty. So, of course, in accordance with their contract. So, with this, we mean like what is the time frame? So, how much time in advance would an employee have to inform the company when they want to leave their job? So, for example, a month in advance or maybe 3 months in advance. You can explain that over here. So, what is the time frame and how much time in advance they need to advise you that they want to quit their job? So 2.4 is the human resource policy. So if you have a written human resource policy already, that's great, and you can upload it and attach it under the file manager, of course. However, maybe for some smaller companies, you don't have a formal human resource policy. Then, as you can see, it's non-mandatory. You can click no, but it would be useful maybe to view guidance and see what kind of things, so what kind of areas of can be included in a human resource policy. And perhaps you would want to create an action on it to start working on it. So the next one is a mandatory. So it is whether your employees have a formal employee contract, which includes their labor condition and a specific job description. So please then upload an example of such an employee contract. And if you don't have this yet, we would like to see that you will start creating such contracts. And you can click again under guidance, and you can see what kind of things, what kind of different points should be included in a labor agreement. So Gustav, you have asked something about 1.17. That's regarding the. I'll go back quickly to see what you mean. Can you reformulate your question, Kesaf? Because I don't see a 1.17. And then while you're doing that, I'll shortly just proceed for the other ones. So we had formal contracts, and then the next one, which is important, would be living wage. So whether your company pays employees at least a living wage, which is equal to or above the legal minimum in your country. So please provide an explanation if necessary, or um, you can as you can see in an example, provide an explanation what is the minimal daily wage or monthly wage, and then indicate what the lowest salary is in your company. So it would regard the lowest salary, and that has to be equal to minimum wage or above. So you can indicate that here. 2.7 is about overtime. So, of course, in the tourism sector, people often work overtime in high season. But then it's good to think how you compensate such overtime. So, is it paid, or is it, for example, time is given back in another time? Unless specific conditions regarding overtime have been agreed by the employee and written in their signed contract of employment. So probably for some companies you have written down in your employee contract how you would deal with overtime. Then please attach the employee contract and specify where we can read this and where we can find this in your contract. Regarding medical insurance, the company contributes to basic medical insurances for all employees on the basis of legal requirements or industry best practices. So you can explain if you either contribute to basic medical insurance. However, in some cases, the government is taking care of basic healthcare, for example, in the UK. And in that case, you can tick NA and you can answer here that the national government is providing health service. Otherwise, please indicate the name of your insurance company and your contract number. And maybe you contribute only partly to medical insurance, for example, half. You can also indicate that here then. So 2.9 is liability insurance. So whether your company has a liability insurance for all its employees, of course, in case of work-related accidents. This is non-mandatory, as you can see, but of course, it's good to have this in place to secure your employees. Please mention then the insurance type and the brand name. 2.10 is regarding holiday and annual leave. So it's whether your employees have the right to a fixed yearly paid holiday, at least in compliance with the national legal requirements. This is probably also if you have a formal employee contract mentioned in there. So please then attach it again with the file manager and provide the explanation over here how holidays and annual leave is dealt with. So then sick leaves, it's simply whether if your employees are entitled to paid sick leave in line with national legal requirements. And often you can also, if you don't know what the national legal requirements are, it might be good to look into that and see what is actually written down about sick leave by employees in your country. Then health and safety. So this is mandatory to comply with. We would like to see that your company has a health, safety, and crisis management policy for employees, which complies again with legal standards or best practices. So accidents and incidents are investigated and corrective measures are taken. And what is most important for this criterion is that you have first aid kits in your company, so in your office, and that staff is trained. Some staff is available that is trained regarding health and safety. So please describe your policy here. And what's also important is that if you have first aid kits in your office, we would like to see a photo of those uploaded under the file manager. And again, in guidance, you can see possible actions which can be part of your health and safety policy. Then 2.13 about equal opportunities. This is about that your company ensures that people are not discriminated in regards to conditions of employment or access to training or senior positions in terms of their gender, race, age, or in any way. So maybe you have this written down in a code of conduct, in the employee handbook, for example. Then it might be good to upload that and describe it over here. But otherwise, you can tick yes and declare that you do not, that you ensure that discrimination does not take place. Then child labor, this is also an important criterion. This might differ per country on from which age you can start working, but we would like to see that the company does not employ children, so 14-year or younger, to complete work which is normally undertaken by adults. And there are special working times for children working within the business in accordance with national regulations and the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child. And you can also look into the ILO Convention 138, what is written down about child labor. And sometimes there's a country-specific answer for this, but then you will see that in your reporting. And if you tick yes, this means that you state and declare that you do not employ children. So 2.15, the complaints procedure. This is whether your company can demonstrate that there's a documented and effective procedure through which employees may raise complaints or grievances that they have. And there is an appropriate and timely follow-up for those complaints. If you have more than 25 employees, we would like to see a formal document. But if you have under 25 employees, you can describe the procedure. So how are complaints in the company being dealt with? Then representation is if your staff, like means through which your staff may make representation to senior management about the key employment issues, so about issues that they face, and if there's a clear process with how this is dealt with. And this can be, of course, in an informal way, but then please explain so in the text box. Then 2.17, disciplinary procedures, is whether there's documented disciplinary procedures in place. And maybe this is regarding the internal rules of the company. And if you have less than 5 employees, this is not an obligation to have, and you can tick NA. Or otherwise, perhaps there are some disciplinary procedures written down in your employee handbook or in a contract, and you can upload that. 2.18 is whether you employ persons with special needs. This is, however, not mandatory to comply with, again, as you can see here. But if you do, then please explain and tick yes. Then measuring employee satisfaction. It might be good to measure whether your employees are satisfied, and if this is done on a regular basis, and suggestions are taken into account if employees have suggestions regarding their work. If you have maybe a survey or another method in place to check employee satisfaction, please describe the procedure. And of course, for organizations with less than 20 staffs, informal methods are also accepted. So whether you have one-to-one conversations about this or feedback meetings, or maybe if you're a big company, you have surveys taking place to measure your employee satisfaction, then please provide that over here. So 2.20, health and safety, is regarding if your staff members receive training regarding their roles, their rights, and responsibilities in regards of social and cultural practices, but also in specific about health and safety practices. So we would like to see how you inform and train your employees, if you do so. What kind of training, how often, who can take this training. Then 2.21 is personal development. So the company ensures its staff competencies, personal development, and advancement by equally offering resources and opportunities. So, for example, training sessions or seminars or education or other kinds of experiences on the nature of organization on their work. So perhaps also field trips, for example. If there's a specific policy about personal development for your employees, of course you can upload that. And otherwise, you can describe if you have such a training policy in place or peer learning, and indicate on average the training hours per employee per year. So then trainee positions, with this we mean whether traineeships and internships are offered to students. So as you can see in the description, please describe how you involve trainees. Do you work with specific educational institutes? Do they come from specific universities? Where do the students come from? Do you accept international students or only national students? And then provide an average number of trainees or trainee positions that you have available per year. Maybe you don't have any traineeships or internships offered, then that might be the case. So then you can tick no, as it is not mandatory.